As faith-filled, Bible-believing Christians, we're instructed to stand fixed, immovable, steadfast for the fruit, or the fulfillment, of the promise. But unless the promise was very specific, we should never allow our expectation to get stuck on some specific way that promise from God is going to manifest. I'm Tim Greenwood, and this is Windows on the Word. We should never allow our expectation to get stuck on some specific way that promise from God is going to manifest, because we could be wrong. For example, God asked Abram, He said, "Leave your father's house and nation, and I will." Now here's what He will. See, the full contract can be found in Genesis 12:1. Even though Abram, who later was named Abraham, became very rich and powerful, and the land of Canaan from the Nile to the Euphrates became his, God's provision never actually met Abraham's expectation because of his presumption. God gave Abraham the promised land, but Abraham never actually received it because he had something different in mind. Hebrews 11:10 says that Abraham searched out the entire land looking for, it says, a fine walled city whose foundations were laid by God Himself. And therefore, for the rest of his life, he kept on the move and lived like an alien on the very land that belonged to him. God promised him something in general, but because of his presumption, Abraham refused to budge from his specific expectation of how God was going to fulfill that promise. And worse yet, that presumption was passed down to his son Isaac and to his grandson Jacob, and so on. So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob missed their promised land because God's broad promise didn't quite exactly meet their specific expectations. God told Abraham it was his, but he didn't receive it and acted like a guest in his own house, like a foreigner or a vagrant in his own land. God even officially, ceremonially gave it to him by covenant, actually giving him the land's boundaries, but he still didn't receive it. Isaac didn't receive it. Jacob didn't receive it. And after 430 years in Egypt and wandering in the wilderness, those millions of descendants of Jacob, who's Israel, they still didn't receive it. Finally, reluctantly, they crossed the Jordan and had to go recover the possession of that land by force, piece by piece, that same land that God had already given to Abraham. So what's the lesson here? We know as faith-filled, believing Christians that we are to stand and believe in good faith that we will receive whatever God has promised us. But when you read or hear the promises that were offered, did you read or hear what specifically was promised? Or was it more broad or general than you presumed? Could it be that your expectation of what was offered was more specific than what God actually did offer? Could it be that God may fulfill that offer in some different way or use a different method than what you expect? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were searching and believing their entire lifespans for a non-existent, well-placed, walled city that had been built by God Himself. Whereas what God had offered and what God gave them was the land that they walked on and all the land that they could see while they were out there walking around looking for that city. And the whole time that passed, they could have built that well-placed walled city on their very own anywhere in that land that they chose. Did you know that most contract disputes are caused by one or more of the parties' expectations exceeding that which was actually offered in the contract because of presumption? And since every relationship of every kind is actually a contractual relationship, relational disputes are often caused by the same thing: unfulfilled expectations due to presumption. See, I believe that the devil would like nothing better than to sow seeds of doubt and unbelief into your heart and into your mind by influencing you to believe and steadfastly stand for something that God has not specifically even offered you, much less entered into a contract with you about. I've heard preachers with my own ears convince audience that they should believe for something that the Bible just didn't say or didn't even promise. Now, whether that was those preachers parroting something that they heard from some other preachers, or whether it was some kind of manipulation, I'm not going to judge. So regardless of who tells you what God has promised you, it's your personal responsibility to read it with your own two eyes, what God has actually said. And then, and only then, convert that offer into a contract between you and God. And then, and only then, stand fixed, immovable, and steadfast for the fruit or the fulfillment of that promise, fully expecting that that fruit from that contract is going to be fulfilled. And if you know God like I do, then you already know that God always gives over and above whatever's asked or promised. But your reasonable expectation should always be limited to the extent of what was actually offered, and then just be grateful for everything that gets added to that above and beyond. Hey, thanks for joining us for this video. We can stay connected if you subscribe. You can be notified when the next Windows on the Word video is released. So just click on the subscribe link, click on the like button, and click on the notify bell here on the screen. And please, share this video with others.